Hey, it is my distinct honor and privilege to be able to have a dialogue with you all today. As I get an opportunity to talk to an organization, to me is one of the spearheads of taking care of 75,000 airmen and their families, leading the charge of being a great advocate to ensure the health and wellness of not only the force, but the families are met. Air Force Sergeant Association, to me, is one of the best organizations when it comes to doing what is right, when it comes to taking care of America's soldiers, sailors, air marines, and guardians. Notice I added the other services in there because I truly believe that what they do is not just for one service, it is for the entire Department of Defense. Hey, so today what I want to do is I want to lean in on leadership a little bit. You may say, I've heard 1,000 conversations about leadership. Why do we keep talking about leadership? Well, I'm here to tell you that the only thing the adversaries fear, greater than anything else, greater than any munitions we may have, platforms we may have, is the people. They fear the fact that we have let me correct that we have the best non-commissioned officers in the free world. And everybody wants to emulate what we have in our non-commissioned officer corps. So I must lean in on leadership because leadership is the thing that is going to allow us to maintain and sustain that powerful deterrent platform we have called non-commissioned officers. As I start to prepare to have this conversation with you today and to lean in on leadership, I knew that I must first understood what is this thing leadership really is all about. See, if you was to peel into a book called Webster, and a lot of you probably don't understand or don't know who Webster is because you've been using things like Siri and Alexa and Google, and it's been giving you all the answers you wanted. But as I was growing up, I had only one source that I could rely on, and that was Webster. That dictionary, that red and blue book, that 2.5-pound book, that book that consists of some 988,978 words and still growing. That book that allowed me to understand the true meaning and definitions of words told me that leadership is simply the ability. Now, I must stop on that word ability. If I want to give you the real, no-joke understanding of leadership, I must look at that subset that falls under ability. You know, if you have the ability to lead someone, you must have three things. You must have the skills, you must have the knowledge, and you must have the talent. That's the subset of ability. You must have the skills to be able to articulate what is the mission we're trying to get after and make it believable for that someone that you're trying to influence. You must have the knowledge to be able to articulate to them what is that mission really all about? And not just knowledge on surface, but knowledge that's believable, which means that you studied to show yourself approved. And then you must have that talent. You must have that talent of influencing. See, today's generation is not a generation that wants to be told. They want to be showed, and they want to be showed through demonstration. So it is paramount that you have the talent when it comes to being able to get them to accomplish the mission. And then it says someone, the ability to influence someone. Well, we have to take a moment and talk about that someone, because see, that someone is not you. That someone was not those that led you. That someone was not those that mentored you. That someone is not those that coached you. What I'm trying to tell you is that someone is different than who you were or who you were led by. You know, as we dig into that someone, we must understand for the first time in our nation's history, we have 4 distinct generations in our ranks. We have that baby boomer generation, that generation that really understood what it was to be self-motivated, self-determined, and self-led. That generation that was dug in, disciplined, hard-nosed, and accomplishing every mission. And then we have that generation that's somewhat in the middle. That generation that call themselves Generation X. A generation that really only a small amount of time really articulated their generational coverage. If you look at most generations last up to 20 years. But this generation only lasts a small 11 years. Why? Because this generation was a generation that was caught between baby boomers and millennials. This generation was a generation that said, I didn't have all of that Gucci stuff millennials had. I didn't have that super duper system. What I had was simply Hotmail, or what I had was simply floppy disk. See, I was a generation that started the Lasky kids, the Home Alone kids. I was a generation that started to raise myself, and I was the first generation that had little to no relationship skills. And then we have that Generation Y, that millennial generation that everyone talks about, a generation that truly started out during the time of the cyber boom, a generation that grew up on understanding what it was to have 50,000 friends and never met any of them through that form called Facebook, a generation that had little to no relationship skills because it wasn't required for them to have them. Why? Because their form of communication was texting and never talking. And so we had a generation that really understood what it was to operate in that non-relationship requirement. And now we must lead them. And then we had that Generation Z, that generation that really where 98% of them believe in whatever they see on their smart devices. That generation that spend 10 to 12 hours a day on their smart devices. A generation that never really had to have those conversations because of those smart devices. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm telling you is that if you don't know who you are trying to influence, it's going to be virtually impossible for you to influence them. See, if you try to influence a Generation Z, sailor, soldier, air, marine, with the same techniques that you could influence a baby boomer, you're going to lose out. Why? Because that Generation Z doesn't want to be yelled at and screamed at and cursed at and demand that. What they want to do is they want to be talked to. They want to be heard. They want to be listened to. They want to have input. See, as you start to look at your generation and your baseline and your skill set, I would ask you not to focus just on what you was brought up on, but also take the moment to focus on what they were brought up on and how you can fit into their circle. You know, also as I started to do a little bit more in-depth reading, I looked at what Kurt Leafwin said in 1939. He said there was only 3 leadership styles that was required for you to be a sufficient leader. He said that if you was a directive leader, you would be successful. If you was a participator leader, you would be successful. If you was a delegated leader, you would be successful. Well, let's look at those for a moment. How do you direct someone who doesn't have relationship skills? How do you demand on someone who don't know how to take hurt, harm, or danger? How do you fuss at someone that don't know how to receive that as corrective criticism? I don't think the directive leadership style would be the paramount leadership style for this generation. Well, then you say, Sergeant Major, why not use participative? How do you get somebody to participate in something they don't understand? How do you get them to participate in something that you have not taught them? This is not the baby boomers who you can just tell them something and they grab it and they move forward. No, this is an inquisitive generation. This is a generation of why. This is a generation of because. This is a generation of how. They want to be taught, mentored, coached, teach, and trained, and developed at the same time that you are directing them. Participative, little bit. Totally, I would say not. And then delegated. How do you delegate to somebody who's never walked a mile in that process? How do you delegate to someone who always is asking the why? How do you delegate to somebody who's always wanted to turn the aperture a little bit to suffice what they think right looks like? Or more so, what they think the smart device told them right looks like. If I was talking to Kurt Leafwin today, I would say those 3 leadership principles were probably great when you had that rock steady baby boomer, tell me what to do, I'm going to move out, I'm going to accomplish generation. But today's generation, we need to have another leadership style. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to introduce you to what I consider to be 21st century leadership style. The leadership style that I think will be the most successful leadership style that you ever can embark upon. You know, as I was reading a little bit more about this leadership style, I had to understand what Robert Greenleaf was really trying to articulate in 1972, when he simply said, the leadership style of the future. Now, he didn't caveat it with the leadership style of the 21st century. I'm adding that to it, but he said the leadership style of the future is a leadership style that we all look at and we say is a sign of weakness. That leadership style is servant leadership. And he went on to define servant leadership as someone demonstrating their ability to lead by their willingness to serve. Come on now. Someone demonstrating their ability to lead by their willingness to serve. See, if you're not willing to serve those that you are leading, then this style is not for you. Servant leadership clearly says that you must be able to allow yourself to walk a mile in their shoes. No, this is not a weak leadership style. This is not a leadership style of you being soft. This is not a leadership style of you giving in. But this may be the leadership style that allow freedom to continue to reign in the greatest country in the free world. Why? Because those young American sons and daughters are now buying in to what must happen in order for us to be successful. You know, when he came up with this leadership style and he said, I'm not just going to articulate it, I'm going to give you some requirements that come with it. And so if you slow down and if you really look at what are the 5 requirements of a leader to be a proficient servant leader, I want you to look at these 5 requirements and then I want you to think about those that you're charged to lead. No. I want you to think about your kids that you're raising. And tell me if these 5 things will not help you in being a more proficient parent in leading your kids. Because see, leadership is not only leading those that are subordinate to you, it's also leading those loved ones that you want to see be successful. He says that you must do 5 things. You must, number 1, listen. Not just hear, but have an ear of listening. That means take a pregnant pause when somebody is talking to you to absorb what they're saying to you before you respond to what you think you just heard. You've got to listen. And then he said, number 2 is you must show appreciation. Now, here you go when you say, hey, somebody, I can't do that because that's a sign of weakness. I don't want to just stroke everybody's ego. No, appreciation is not defined as just caveats. It's also defined as disciplinary remarks. See, you can show me appreciation by taking the time to correct me in what I'm doing wrong. That's instilling trust from me to you. Why? Because now I'm beginning to truly believe that you care enough to take the time to correct me, help me, and lead me. So often we think appreciation is all about giving the roses. No, sometimes you have to hand them a thorn of correction. And then he says, listen, the 3rd thing is paramount. You have to be humble. You have to be humble while you are addressing and dealing with this generation. They don't want to hear that you walked to school uphill in 0-degree weather barefooted. No, that's not what they want to talk about. Now, they want to hear about how do you put yourself second to understand what they're going through and fit into their circle to solve their problems. And then the next thing he said, number 4, he said that you must show that you care. You must show that you care. Now, if you're doing the appreciation, then you're showing that you're caring. If you're disciplining me and correcting me, You show it that you care. Why? Because in order to show appreciation and discipline me and correct me, it takes your time. And there is no better illustration to show you care than taking your time. And then after he says, you must show that you care, he also says, number 5, you must instill trust. You must instill trust to the point where I know I can have a conversation with you and it's with you. You must instill trust that I know that you have my back 24/7. You must instill trust where I know that no matter what, good, bad, or indifference, I can lean on you. Think about those 5 things for a moment. Think about if you slow down and listen. Think about if you appreciate from a point of showing gratitude for what they did to discipline for what they should have did. Think about if you be humble while you're executing this. Think about if you show a little bit of caring in the realm of building trust. You know, he said, in order to do this, you got to have 4 distinct atmospheres while you're doing it. You got to have an atmosphere where you allow diversity of thought. You got to have an atmosphere where you're allowing leaders to be raised up. You got to have an atmosphere where you're instilling that trust. And you have to have an atmosphere that nothing can permeate it other than success. Man, I'm thinking if I just slow down and look at those I'm leading, take the good things from the way that I was led, but exercise the things that are necessary today for me to be a proficient leader. Think about serving those that are allowing my family to enjoy the freedoms they have each and every day. Think about that golden rule of treating others like you want to be treated. Man, if we could just take this small principle and wrap our hands around it and make it part of our leadership style, we can make sure that freedom continues to reign in the greatest country in the free world. Leadership, to me, is an art. It's an art because Webster says it's the ability. It's the ability to influence someone to accomplish the mission. It's the ability to make sure that at all times that I understand that I must have the skills, the knowledge, and the talent to be able to influence this generation, which I would say could be the greatest generation of all time, to continue standing in the gap, continue raising their right hand, continue saying those 79 words, continue saying that I am my brother and sister's keeper, because those that are leading me allow me to have that mindset in all that I do. Leadership is an art, but it's an art that I ask you, Air Force Sergeant Association members, to grab. I ask you to lean on. I ask you to lean in, because without you leading our most precious resource, I am not sure what tomorrow will look like. We just recently had a major win where we showed that America's sons and daughters are standing in the gap and ready to fly 18 hours to deliver what we must have delivered in a timely fashion. But that's only because of great leadership. How do you lead those that you are charged to lead? Do you lean on the way you were led? Or are you ready to change and lean on the way they needed to be led? God bless you. Thank you a lot, and I hope this helped you.